Emma had not visited Seattle in nearly 5 years, and the cool autumn air felt like a welcome change from her hectic life in Chicago. She was 36 now, and though her career in publishing had given her comfort and independence, something inside her always felt a little empty. When her cousin Laura invited her to stay for a few weeks, Emma accepted without hesitation. She wanted family, warmth, and maybe a chance to slow down. What she did not expect was how much this visit would change her. When Laura's son Ethan came to the airport to pick her up, Emma almost did not recognize him. The last time she saw him, he was a shy teenager, awkwardly hiding behind his phone during family dinners. Now he was 24, tall, broad-shouldered, and confident in a quiet way. His dark hair fell slightly into his eyes, and when he smiled, there was something genuine about it that unsettled her. "Emma, let me take your bag," he said, reaching for her suitcase before she could protest. She laughed lightly. "You've grown up," she replied, surprised at how small her voice sounded. The drive to Laura's house was filled with casual conversation, but Emma could not help noticing how polite and attentive Ethan was. He asked her questions about her work, her travels, and even remembered that she used to write poetry in college. It startled her how much he noticed and remembered. That first evening in Laura's warm, lively home was full of laughter. Laura had cooked a big dinner, and the three of them sat around the table telling old family stories. Ethan joined in, his voice calm but confident, and Emma caught herself watching him longer than she should have. He wasn't just Laura's son anymore. He was his own person now, grown and full of presence. She pushed the thought aside, reminding herself that this was family, nothing more. After dinner, Ethan carried her suitcase upstairs to the guest room. His kindness was natural, not forced, and when he smiled at her before leaving, she felt a strange warmth inside her chest. She shook it off, blaming the long flight for making her too sensitive. The next morning, the house was filled with soft light as Emma woke early. She wanted to freshen up before breakfast. She walked into the bathroom with her toiletries and started brushing her hair in front of the mirror. The steam from her shower still clung faintly to the air, and she was lost in thought, staring at her reflection, when the door suddenly opened. She turned quickly. Ethan stood there holding a stack of clean towels in his arms. For a brief moment, both froze. Their eyes locked, and the silence between them stretched longer than it should have. Emma's heart jumped, her pulse quickening as she realized how vulnerable she felt, standing there with her hair loose and her morning routine unfinished. "Oh, sorry," Ethan stammered, stepping back quickly, his face flushed with embarrassment. "I didn't know you were in here." Emma felt her cheeks warm as she clutched her brush. "It's okay," she said softly, though her voice trembled more than she wanted. He placed the towels on the counter quickly, avoiding her eyes, and slipped out, closing the door gently behind him. The moment lasted no more than a few seconds, yet Emma stood frozen, staring at the door long after it had shut. Her chest was tight, her breath uneven. It was such a small thing, such a harmless mistake, and yet it stirred something inside her that she could not explain. She pressed her hands against the cool counter, telling herself it was nothing, but deep down she knew it was not nothing. It was a spark, tiny, unexpected, but undeniable. When she joined Laura and Ethan for breakfast, the atmosphere felt ordinary again. Laura chatted cheerfully about her plans for the day, and Ethan poured Emma a cup of coffee without being asked. He looked calm, as if nothing had happened, but when their eyes met across the table, Emma felt the echo of that moment in the bathroom all over again. She tried to push it away, to laugh and smile and keep things normal, but her heart betrayed her. Every time she glanced at Ethan, she saw not the boy she once knew, but the man standing there this morning, surprised, close, and real in a way that unsettled her deeply. It was a family visit, she reminded herself. Just a visit. But Emma couldn't shake the strange, nervous energy that lingered in the air between them. And as she stepped outside later to take in the crisp Seattle air, she whispered to herself, "What is happening to me?" Emma tried to brush off the bathroom incident, telling herself it was just a silly mistake. Houses were busy, doors got opened, and it wasn't worth thinking about. Yet the image of Ethan standing in the doorway kept slipping back into her mind. The surprise on his face, the way his eyes met hers, was too vivid to forget. She reminded herself again and again, he's Laura's son, just family, nothing more. But her heart refused to listen. At breakfast, the kitchen smelled of coffee and toast. Laura moved about cheerfully, talking about errands, while Ethan sat at the table scrolling through his phone. When Emma reached for the strawberry jam, Ethan did the same, their hands brushing for a brief second. It was so small, but the touch sent a ripple through her. He glanced up at her, gave a quick smile, and passed her the jar. Emma forced herself to smile back, but inside she was unsettled. Later that afternoon, Laura went into town, leaving Ethan and Emma to tidy the kitchen. The air felt heavy with silence. Emma tried to focus on washing dishes, but every time Ethan came close, she felt her chest tighten. At one point, he reached across her to put away a glass, and his sleeve brushed her arm. She pulled back quickly, pretending to be busy, but her thoughts were spinning. Why was she reacting this way? He hadn't done anything wrong. He was simply kind, helpful, thoughtful. And yet every gesture felt like it meant more than it should. That evening, they all sat together in the living room. Laura was talking on the phone while Ethan sat quietly flipping through channels. Emma sat on the couch, pretending to read a magazine, but her eyes drifted toward him again and again. He looked so relaxed, his long legs stretched out, his expression calm. For years, she had been surrounded by colleagues who were distant, men who were careless with their words and emotions. But Ethan was different. He noticed things. He listened. He remembered details she had long forgotten. That kind of attention was rare, and Emma realized she had been craving it without even knowing. When bedtime came, Emma lay awake in the guest room staring at the ceiling. Her mind replayed every small moment of the Datha touch at breakfast. His soft smile, his careful voice when he spoke to her. It wasn't supposed to matter, but it did. She rolled onto her side, pressing her pillow close, whispering to herself, "Stop it, Emma. He's family. You're imagining things." But deep down, she knew she wasn't imagining it. There was something in the way Ethan looked at her as though he was trying to understand her beyond what she said aloud. It wasn't lust, it wasn't childish, it was deeper. It's harder to define, admiration, curiosity, a connection she hadn't expected. The next day, Laura suggested they all go out for lunch. At the restaurant, Emma sat beside Ethan, and again she noticed the subtle ways he cared. He pulled out her chair. He asked if she liked the dish she ordered. And when she dropped her napkin, he picked it up without hesitation. None of it was dramatic, yet each small act made her feel seen in a way she hadn't felt in years. Emma tried to convince herself it was only kindness, nothing more. But when Ethan leaned closer to ask her opinion on something, his voice low and steady, she felt warmth rise to her cheeks. She turned away quickly, afraid Laura might notice. That night, back at the house, Emma excused herself early and went upstairs. She thought being alone would clear her head, but it only made things worse. She paced the room, restless, unable to focus. Her heart was betraying her, pulling her toward something she knew she shouldn't want. She thought of her past relationships, how cold they had felt, how distant. Maybe that was why Ethan's presence felt so magnetic. He reminded her of a closeness she hadn't felt in a long time. She sat by the window, watching the streetlights glow softly outside. In that quiet moment, she admitted the truth to herself. She was drawn to Ethan, not because of the accident in the bathroom, not because of anything physical, but because of the way he made her feel. He made her feel alive again. He made her feel noticed. The realization frightened her. She knew this was dangerous, complicated, and not something she could ever confess. But emotions didn't always follow rules. They grew quietly, slowly, until they filled the heart. And now Emma could no longer deny that her heart was full of something she could not name, something she could not control. The following morning, she tried to act normal. She chatted with Laura, helped set the table, and smiled as though nothing was different. But when Ethan walked into the kitchen, her pulse quickened all over again. He gave her a small nod, a warm look, and in that instant she knew he felt it too. She could not ignore it anymore. Something had changed between them. Something invisible, unspoken, yet powerful. Emma carried the weight of it silently, knowing it was only the beginning of a story she never expected to live. The evening came quietly, with the sky painted in soft shades of orange and purple. Laura announced she had plans to meet an old friend for dinner, leaving the house empty except for Emma and Ethan. The moment the front door closed, silence filled the space. Emma sat on the couch with a book in her lap, though she wasn't really reading. Ethan sat across the room scrolling through his phone, but his glances kept drifting toward her. The air felt heavy, as if both of them were holding back words they didn't dare say. Emma tried to focus on the sound of the clock ticking, but her heart was restless. She finally broke the silence. "Do you want to watch something?" she asked, her voice too casual. "Sure," he said, but he didn't move to turn on the television. Instead, he leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. His eyes met hers, steady, almost searching. "Emma, about the other day," he began. Her breath caught. She knew instantly what he meant. She tried to wave it off. "Ethan, that was nothing. Just a silly accident." But he shook his head slowly. "Not to me. I can't stop thinking about it. Not just the bathroom. About you." Emma's chest tightened. She gripped the edge of her book, unsure how to respond. "You shouldn't say that," she whispered. "I'm your mother's cousin. I'm older. This isn't right." He looked down, his voice soft but steady. "I know all that. I know what people would think. But feelings don't just disappear because they're inconvenient." He raised his eyes again, and they were filled with something raw, something that made her pulse race. "You've always been different, Emma. Even when I was younger, I noticed. You have this way of listening, of making people feel understood. And now, seeing you again, it's stronger than I expected." Emma's throat felt dry. She wanted to stop him, to protect both of them from what was happening, but she couldn't move. His honesty pierced through her, awakening emotions she had buried long ago. For years she had lived with routine, keeping her heart safe, but lonely. And here was Ethan, speaking words she didn't know she needed to hear. She tried to stay firm. "Ethan, you can't look at me that way. It will only hurt us." "But it's the truth," he said simply, "and I'd rather tell you than pretend." The silence that followed was thick with unspoken feelings. Emma looked away, staring at the lamp beside her as though it could save her. Her mind told her to end this conversation, to put walls back up. But her heart was beating too fast, betraying her. She could feel the warmth of his gaze, the sincerity in his words. And she hated how much she wanted to believe them. Finally, she stood, trying to steady herself. "I need some water," she muttered, escaping into the kitchen. She leaned against the counter, pressing her hands flat on the surface, trying to calm down. She could still hear his voice in her head, "Admire you." No one had said that to her in years. Not her coworkers, not the men she had dated briefly. It had been so long since someone saw her, not just as a person passing by, but as someone worth admiring. She poured herself a glass of water and took a shaky sip. She should go back out there, act normal, change the subject. But when she turned, Ethan was standing in the doorway, watching her with quiet intensity. "I didn't mean to scare you," he said softly. I couldn't keep it inside anymore." Emma's chest ached. His voice wasn't demanding. It wasn't reckless. It was gentle, honest. She wanted to tell him to stop, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she whispered, "You don't know what you're doing, Ethan. This could change everything." "I know," he replied, "but hiding how I feel changes nothing." She stared at him, caught between fear and longing. She had always been the responsible one, the one who followed rules and avoided risks. But something about Ethan's honesty broke through her defenses. It wasn't wild attraction. It wasn't reckless desire. It was connection. And connection was far harder to ignore. The sound of the rain tapping against the windows filled the silence between them. For a long moment, they simply stood there, their eyes locked, emotions hanging in the air. Emma felt as though the world had slowed down, leaving only the two of them in that kitchen, caught between what was right and what was real. Finally, she stepped past him, her voice quiet. We can't talk about this anymore tonight. But even as she walked back to the living room, she knew it wasn't over. She could feel it in her chest, the shift, the spark, the truth that neither of them could ignore anymore. Ethan's words had unlocked something in her heart, and no matter how much she tried to push it away, she knew the story between them had only just begun. That night, lying awake in the guest room, Emma replayed every word he had said. "You've always been different. I admire you." The confession left her torn between fear and hope. She pressed her hand against her chest, whispering into the dark, "Why now? Why him?" But there was no answer, only the sound of her own heartbeat. Loud and restless in the silence, the days that followed were heavy with unspoken words. Emma moved through the house as though everything was normal, but nothing felt the same anymore. Ethan's confession lingered in her mind, echoing in the quiet moments, filling her with both warmth and fear. She tried to keep her distance, sitting on the opposite side of the room when they watched television, busying herself with Laura when she was around, but every time Ethan entered a room, her heart reacted. She hated that she noticed. She hated that she cared. But she couldn't deny it. One afternoon, rain fell softly against the windows, wrapping the house in a calm stillness. Laura had gone out shopping, leaving Emma and Ethan alone again. Emma sat curled on the couch, staring out at the gray sky, her thoughts swirling. She didn't even hear him at first when he walked in quietly and sat down across from her. "Emma," said, his voice low but steady. She turned her head slightly, already knowing what he wanted to say. "Ethan, don't. I just need you to listen," he interrupted gently. His eyes were calm, not desperate, but honest in a way that left her breathless. "I know you don't want this. I know you think it's wrong, but I can't pretend anymore. You've changed the way I see love. And even if nothing ever happens between us, I'll always remember that." Emma's throat tightened. His words weren't reckless, they were careful, deliberate, spoken with sincerity that made her chest ache. She wanted to be strong, to remind him of the boundaries that existed, but instead tears gathered in her eyes. She looked down at her hands, unable to meet his gaze. "You don't understand," she whispered. "This could hurt people. It could hurt us. And yet," her voice broke, "and yet I can't stop thinking about you either." For a moment, silence filled the room. The rain tapped steadily against the glass, a soft rhythm that seemed to mirror her heartbeat. Ethan leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "Then at least admit it's real, that I'm not imagining it." Emma lifted her eyes to his, and in that instant, she saw everything: his admiration, his longing, his respect. It wasn't childish, it wasn't shallow. It was genuine. Slowly, she reached for his hand, her fingers trembling as they touched his. His hand closed around hers gently, holding it as though it were fragile. Precious, her tears spilled over, but she smiled faintly. "You're special, Ethan, more than you know. But sometimes love isn't about what we want, it's about protecting each other from choices that could destroy us." He nodded, his jaw tight, his eyes glistening. "I understand. I needed you to know." They sat there for a long moment, holding hands, saying nothing. The silence wasn't empty, it was full of everything they couldn't say out loud. The pull between them was undeniable. But so was the wall of reality standing in their way. Finally, Emma pulled her hand back gently. "This has to stay here. Between us, a memory. A secret." Ethan exhaled, his shoulders heavy with resignation. "Then it will be a secret I carry with me for the rest of my life." The sound of Laura's car pulling into the driveway broke the moment. Emma stood quickly, wiping her tears, composing herself. Ethan leaned back, his face calm again, though his eyes still held the weight of what they had shared. By the time Laura walked in cheerfully with shopping bags, the house looked perfectly ordinary again. No one could have guessed what had just passed between them. That night, Emma lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. She thought of Ethan's words, his steady eyes, the warmth of his hand holding hers. She knew she had made the right choice, choosing silence, choosing boundaries, but it didn't make it easier. It hurt. It hurts because her heart had tasted something it hadn't known in years: to be seen, to be cherished, to be wanted not for what she could give, but simply for who she was. When morning came, she found Ethan in the kitchen, already making coffee. Their eyes met briefly. There was no need for words. Everything had already been said. She smiled softly, and he smiled back, a quiet understanding passing between them. The days slipped by quickly after that. Emma spent more time with Laura, shopping, cooking, catching up. Ethan remained kind, attentive, but careful not to cross the invisible line that now existed between them. Their conversations were lighter, their interactions gentler. But beneath it all, the truth still lingered, silent and unspoken dot on her last day in Seattle. Ethan carried her suitcase to the car just as he had when she first arrived. The air was cool, the sky pale with morning light. Laura hugged Emma tightly, promising to visit soon. When it was Ethan's turn, he stepped forward, his arms wrapping around her in a brief but firm embrace. "Safe travels," he said softly. "Hi,"